Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 12, Episode 135. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here on this Tuesday Steelers Nation. It's been a couple days since we last talked. A lot happening over the weekend. Hope everyone had a safe and fun Memorial Day weekend with family. Dave, how you doing? Good to be back with you.
Yeah, good to be back. The second week of OTAs firing up here now on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I apologize. I can already tell my voice is not great. Still trying to get through a couple of things here health-wise here. So I apologize for that. But OTAs back for 3 more days this week, and then get a little bit of a break, I think, after that. And then the mandatory minicamp gets underway from there. An eventful kind of, I guess, weekend, all things considered, even though not a lot of really, hard-breaking Steelers news. But since we last talked, obviously Omar Khan met the media for his press conference, and I think he did another interview outside of that. I know Cam Heyward's done a podcast interview, and I believe you bought a Porsche too, didn't you?
I'll try to convince myself that it's a Porsche.
But anyway, a busy couple of days here, and going to be another couple busy ones for the next 3 days here. And, we'll see if we learn anything new about this team during this week.
Sure. And my terrible take yesterday was you always hear, or typically hear at some point during the spring, 1, maybe 2 unknown, quote unquote, players in the 9-man. I remember Mike Hilton several years back, his first spring with the Steelers. He got some buzz back then. So it's football in shorts. You never want to read too much into it. But usually there's one name that, back end of the 90-man roster kind of guy, first year player that you hear about. So I'm hoping to hear something like that this week.
Yeah, and we haven't really heard that yet,
right? Not yet.
And it's one of the things that I wrote about, maybe when it comes to some of these undrafted kids, prior to OTAs getting started. Man, you sure would like to hear about, some buzz about 1 or 2 of those kids. And look, you had a guy like Mateo Durant, the running back out of Duke was one of those guys that you thought, all right, maybe you hear some buzz about him, and maybe one of the edge guys steps up here. So, you just want to hear that, they're grasping the information good, that kind of thing, because there's not a whole lot of really, honest to goodness football happening out there, football
Sure.
in shorts. But, I think over the years, the things that we've been impressed by, or at least have been alerted to being impressed by, were things I think that have come out of like other players' mouths. Some of the veterans saying that, this kid's, in the Mike Hilton situation. I believe that was it was another player on the team that
Ramon Foster, remember talking about him quite a bit.
Right. Ramon Foster that had said something about him. So yeah, it'd be nice to hear something this week. But once again, you're talking about 3 OTA practices here. You're not going to get a lot out of Mike Tomlin, who Mike Tomlin just wants to see how players can retain information, that kind of thing there. But I don't know, maybe we'll get a tidbit or 2 this week. But it would be nice to have, because there are definitely some deficiencies on this roster at this point, on the depth chart. We've talked about the running back position. We talked about outside linebacker. Man, you could use, you like to see maybe one of these young tackles or another offensive lineman maybe step up something to that kind of degree.
Definitely. Anytime you can find that diamond in the rough, even if it's a position of strength, it's just all the better for your roster overall. But Dave, let's start back to Friday. And in the last couple of days here, the big news: Omar Khan officially introduced as the Pittsburgh Steelers' next general manager, holding his press conference on Friday morning. I missed some of that because I was out and about, but I've gone back and obviously listened to it. I don't think anything Khan said was earth-shattering. I don't think anyone expected anything Khan to say would fall into that category, but it was just good to hear from him. I thought, he definitely, held court, and he was articulate and smart and confident, and all the things that I'm sure led to Pittsburgh actually hiring him. So I think it was good for Steelers Nation to finally get to hear from a man that they've known about for a while, but probably haven't really seen or heard of ever before.
Yeah, look, he talked a little bit about the guys that he's bringing along for the ride with him, and Sheldon White, calling him a Steeler type of person, and Sheldon White is, I think, as we already covered there, comes over from Washington and spent time, a lot of his time in Detroit, and kind of, well, I guess you could kind of call him an understudy there with Kevin Colbert for a couple years before Kevin came to Pittsburgh way back in 2000 there. Andy Weidl, just, it's been off the charts, the kind of, praise that Andy Weidl's been getting, especially from Omar there. And, Omar knows that for him to be an effective general manager here moving forward here, it's going to really have to take a team type effort. And one of the things that Khan said, during several, during not only his press conference, but I think one that took part on the podcast interview since then, was him talking about, look, we're all going to get in a room and we're going to make educated Steelers type decisions here. So it doesn't, obviously Omar will probably have the final say before having to pass it on to the big boss, Art Rooney the second there. But I don't view him ruling with an iron fist, kind of situation here. I don't like the continued narratives, though, that Omar knows nothing about football here. Does he know as much about the scouting end as probably, as say like an Andy Weidl? Probably not. But this is a guy that, especially in his early in his career in New Orleans, spent a lot of time studying the game of football there. And this is a guy, football through and through, dating all the way back when he was a little kid. And his passion came from his dad's love from football and the Saints in particular there. So, look, I mean, it's a long time coming here. And Omar Khan has paid a lot of his dues here. So, and, you said a lot of the things that came out of his mouth weren't surprising. I don't think we're going to see sweeping, at least visible changes in some of these policies here. He even talked about not negotiating contracts in season, which has been a long-standing kind of Steelers tradition there, about once you get into week one of the season until the season ends, contract negotiations are off at that point there. Several other little things that hints that he's given along the way makes it seem like, there's not going to be sweeping changes in a lot of the kind of, broad brush practices that the Steelers do. They're going to build through the draft still, that kind of thing there. Now he has kind of said several times that he has other ideas and he doesn't want to give them away, yada, yada. But I think we're starting to get a little bit better picture, maybe some analytics things with him that he'll dive deeper into. And, who knows, maybe open up the scope a little bit when it comes to draft time, as far as the players that they look at as well.
Sure. There's always going to be tweaks in your own stamp and way of doing things. And, Khan has, generally speaking, a different background than Kevin Colbert, although obviously worked alongside him for 21 years all in Pittsburgh. But you're always going to have your own spin and thoughts and ideas. And so what those look like, we'll have to see. Maybe we'll kind of be able to suss them out over time based on the moves the Steelers do or do not make. Do want to talk about the official front office changes announced by the team later on Friday. 3 of them and more could come later, of course, but the 3 that we know, Andy Weidl officially announced as the team's assistant general manager. Sheldon White, already reported to be brought on a couple days ago, or last week, I should say, officially the director of pro scouting, and Dan Colbert with the promotion to director of college scouting. What does that mean for a guy like Phil Kreidler, who's the college scouting coordinator? Those roles and titles seem pretty similar. Could that mean a retirement for Phil Kreidler? That's possible, though nothing's been made official yet.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to kind of watch the Steelers website and the media back end of the website to see front office changes and how those go as well too. And that's kind of one of the things that we've hit on throughout this process here. Going to be interesting to see beyond kind of the front line, if you will, into that secondary and third line of the scouting department and football operations to see how that much changed. Now, obviously, Brandon Hunt, that's the other shoe that's kind of dropped at this point. To what position is he going to the Eagles specifically? I think all we know at this point is just scouting department, right? Something along those lines in there. Now, a lot of people have been asking us, are the Steelers going to get any draft pick for compensatory draft pick for this? It doesn't sound like it. Right. I think it's got to be more of a general manager or a head coach job along those lines there. So based on kind of, you don't want to speak in absolutes right now, but at least the way this thing is being kind of described, at least on the Eagles end of things, when it comes to a guy like Brandon Hunt, the position that he's going to take over there is not going to be enough for him for the Steelers to qualify for any type of compensatory draft pick there.
Right, that appears to be the case. And so it's a little hard because the language the NFL has offered is a little vague. It says head coach, or I think the exact language is top executive, but that presumably means general manager. We know Hunt's not going to be that. We don't know exactly what the title Hunt's going to carry, but I don't expect or anticipate or assume this Steelers team getting compensatory picks for losing Brandon Hunt. But you knew basically the second that they hired Omar Khan and that they were hiring Andy Weidl to be the assistant GM, Hunt was gone. He was not going to stay in that situation. And I had talked about this, I think, back in early May when Weidl was getting some of that serious interest from Pittsburgh, that basically those two guys could swap. It's a trade. It's Andy Weidl for Brandon Hunt, and that appears to be what's happening.
Let's see. If you look across the board here, Omar Khan, general manager, Andy Weidl, assistant general manager, Sheldon White, director of pro scouting, Dan Colbert, what's his official title now? Director
of college scouting.
Okay, director. And what was it before?
He was just pro scout, college scout, I believe.
Okay, all right. Dan Rooney Jr. still listed as player personnel coordinator. Going to be interesting to see if that sticks there. And you had a pro scouting coordinator in Brandon Hunt, and as you mentioned, Phil Kreider listed as college scouting coordinator. You can put lipstick on this, give these guys different titles and all like that. But I don't think we've seen the end of this kind of playing out just yet.
Sure, more changes could happen. We'll try to keep up with them best as we can. Neil Stratton's a great resource in that. He follows this stuff closely. The Steelers page is notoriously slow for updating some of this, but there's other resources we have to try to see any comings and goings. So we'll keep you posted. But certainly you could see one or two or a couple more, scouting changes, front office changes before the dust settles.
How long has Dennis McInnes been a Bledsoe scout with a team?
A Bledsoe scout in particular, 1 or 2 years. He was a scouting intern 3, 4, 5 years ago. He's from Oregon, and then he moved up to Bledsoe scout. Chidi Iwoma moved from Bledsoe scout to area scout. Looks like he's going to cover more of the Southwest right now than they brought in Fawaz as the scouting intern. So as a Bledsoe scout, it's been about, I don't know, maybe 2 years, and then he's been with the team for roughly, let's call it 5 years.
All right.
So we'll see. We'll keep you up to date for sure on that. So those are the latest front office changes from Khan. I think a lot of that's, I don't want to call it status quo, but certainly maintaining the continuity and the standard, and certainly what Pittsburgh has done so well and so effectively. You don't want to change that too much. Khan's going to have his own spin on things. And I think philosophically, you see a lot of the similarities. He pulled the Bill Parcells of building your roster, get guys to get after the quarterback and guys to protect the quarterback. And so I think he has that bit of that trench mindset of where that game begins.
Yeah, look, and going back, something I've quoted several times on these years over the years about Bill Parcells and the way his kind of mentality was heading into early rounds, obviously, of a draft. Bill Parcells has famously said several times, you either get a quarterback you get a guy that can protect the quarter, or you get a guy that can protect the quarterback, or you get a guy that can get after the quarterback there. And in so many words, that's what Omar Khan said during what ended up being a pretty good interview. Who was the guy that he had the interview with on the podcast the other day?
Jerry Hughes.
Jerry Hughes. Okay. And that ended up being the back half of that, of that podcast interview ended up, being some pretty decent questions and answers in there. And look, why didn't Khan mention the quarterback position as well? Well, they got that, or at least they hope they got one there in Kenny Pickett there. But excuse me, my takeaway from all this is, go ahead and mark it down, Alex. First round draft pick for the Steelers in 2023 is either going to be a tackle or an edge rusher, and I don't think that will hurt the feelings of many people listening to this podcast. Should that wind up indeed being the case, look, we'll see how the rest of this depth chart plays out here at the outside linebacker position the rest of the way. Maybe they'll bring in another veteran here. Obviously, we'll see what happens once we get into the 2022 season to see if a guy like Alex Highsmith can make that next jump that they're hoping he can make. But regardless, you got to keep that. You got to keep that pipeline of edge rushers coming there, and it's been a little while now, obviously since they last drafted an edge rusher kind of high there, and I guess that would be Alex Highsmith several years ago there. So it's time for them to refuel that. And on top of it, man, we talked about it a lot this past offseason here, particularly this team has not drafted a first round tackle since probably before you were born, or pretty damn close. It feels like it.
Jermaine Stevens, right?
Jermaine Stevens, yeah. So, went the whole Kevin Colbert era of this team not drafting a tackle in the first round there. So I understand supply and demand. A lot of times where the Steelers have picked, you end up in that area where maybe 3 tackles have been off the board, but who knows? Maybe you need to get more in the mindset. If there's a tackle that we'd like, maybe they go up and get them. That kind of thing. You just can't keep blaming it on where you draft, in a round as to why maybe you haven't addressed that position. Now the Steelers have gotten, for luck. For the lack of a better word, the last several years with Alejandro Villanueva, and look, Alejandro Villanueva won't go down as a premier All-Pro left tackle, a Pro Bowl left tackle, but he was more than serviceable, and I think history overall is not going to be as kind to Alejandro Villanueva where it should be. But he gave you a lot of durability there at that position as well, too. Something that you just don't find in the NFL, a player week in, week out, especially at the left tackle position. I mean, sort of Joe Thomas-like, along those lines there. We'll see how how this season goes for him. We'll see what happens with Chukwuma Okorafor, who's basically on a 1-year deal if you want to slice it and dice it up there. But this team really could be staring a tackle or an outside linebacker type square in the face in the first round of the 2023 draft. And I like that mentality really that Omar Khan has, because I am a longtime subscriber of protect the quarterback or get after the quarterback.
And I think an offensive lineman right now is a lot more likely than an edge guy who knows what the world looks like 10 months from now, but based on just the core force play and more, it's a big year 2 for him. And even at guard as well, it's a big year 3 for Kevin Dotson. If he doesn't play well this year, Pittsburgh could certainly look to do something there as well. And we don't even know how good Mason Cole is going to play center. So there's a lot of outstanding questions there, clearly. And so certainly you're going to probably see an offensive lineman at some point next year strap, but we'll cross those bridges when we come to it. One thing Khan did say, and my knowledge base here is very, very limited, and I want to do some more research. And if you guys have more thoughts on this, maybe our friends across the pond. In that interview with Jerry Hughes, Khan talked about the Premier League and how he's looked to the Premier League as a way to develop players. He likes what that league has done. I don't know specifically what that means. I'm not smart enough about soccer to know how they develop players or how that system kind of works, but that was maybe the most open and transparent thing Khan had said at any point over the last several days. And so I'd love to explore that more. Have someone maybe kind of tell me some of the basic, broad things the Premier League does, because Khan appears to be watching that.
Yeah, and is he talking along the line of maybe some analytics? Because he talked about GPS and analytics and a few other things in that interview as well too. So that's a exciting aspect of this, that he's talking that kind of language.
Right.
As well. Look, we've always kind of envisioned the Steelers, when it comes to at least the measurable end of things, as being, and there's been evidence for years of liking these sparky, more athletic players. And basically, I think that's what you kind of need to call it at this point, is a more athletic player is kind of what they look for, especially in these early rounds. There, it's not hard to look and say, we'll go back and look at the RAS score, the P Spark score on this player, and without a doubt. But a lot of times too, and they like production. I think that's one thing that we've learned over the years, that they love they love production. Especially, at like wide receiver, we talked about the 100 catch plateau, which George Pickens obviously came in a little bit under that there. Sometimes I wonder though, the tape, got to keep going back to the tape. Sometimes I don't think maybe they're looking at too many of these things and not concentrating so much on the tape, or diving deep enough into some of the analytics, like the things that we had talked about with Devin Bush ahead of him being drafted. Yeah, the athleticism was there. Obviously the bloodline was there, but where was the actual playmaking at? Those kind of things there. But to hear Omar Khan say some of the things that he said, and then kind of tease other things with saying, well, I don't want to tip my hand in it. Sure does make it seem like, they're going to take this kind of to the next level in certain areas. And the Premier League, I don't know what he meant by that, because what kind of developing do they do in the Premier League?
Right. I just don't know. I don't watch much soccer. Shocker. That's a dumb American not watching much soccer. So I don't really know. But when he talks about GPS analytics, I know obviously every team in the NFL, at least I assume every team, during practice, they wear those trackers so they can measure speed and steps and things like that. And so even the Steelers, who are not at the forefront of technology relative to the rest of the NFL, they do those things. But I wonder if Khan's going to even implement more of those measurements and ability to track players and see, that's a better way to game, maybe when a guy's getting fatigued, and to help manage practice reps whenever you can kind of track the number of steps they're taking and their miles per hour and other kind of measurements that those trackers of players wear can demonstrate and measure. So I just wonder what that looks like. But I think it's certainly safe to say, just broadly, big picture speaking, this team's going to be more numbers focused, more analytics focused. Andy Weidl comes from that background as well in Baltimore and in Philadelphia, two teams that have been more or less in the forefront of all things analytics. And so I think that'll be a bigger component of how Pittsburgh operates, even knowing that Mike Tomlin's still the head coach, and that's not exactly his favorite thing to talk about.
Right. He says the impact of sports technology, things like GPS and new ways of predicting results. Ooh, I like that. Analytics. He says, the other thing, this is something else that stuck out to me too. The other thing is the impact of social media. He says that's a huge part of this today. He says, it's around, 24/7. He also says the wellness side of things, mental health, the wellness of player development, how that factors into it. He spoke on as well too. So he says, well, I think don't want to divulge all my secrets, but I think having the right people that understand it under you is key. And there's not a great deal of people that I would say are prepared to take on that role. He says, fortunately, I think I've identified a couple that I feel really good about, but the key is finding the right person to oversee all that understands it. And he goes on, as you mentioned, to say, and one thing is you see it in other sports. He says, the Premier League. The Premier League has done a great job when it comes to the area, to that area, in my opinion. He says, I've done homework on what they've done in terms of developing their players, and they've really done a good job. So seeing what other leagues are doing is always important. in my opinion there. So that's be interesting if a follow-up question would have been he gave you a good, he threw it out there. Been interesting to have him to see if you could have got him to dive deeper in that.
Right. But I wouldn't even know what the follow-up would be because
Right.
I can't speak to the soccer. I mean, you could just ask him what they do, but I'm guessing Khan wouldn't have given you much of an
Right.
answer there. So that's something that I'm going to try to investigate in the next couple of weeks here. But overall, impressed to hear of what Khan said. And again, I think it's important to have that continuity and that internal promotion and hire at the top to keep kind of this quote unquote Steelers way going. But then you couple that with an outsider in Andy Weidl, but a guy who's a Pittsburgh native but will have his own ideas and is his own man and should work well together with Omar Khan, given their experience in New Orleans together.
Before I tee this up for you to talk a little bit more about Weidl, Khan was talked about, kind of extending the players and all like that. And, he talked about, when you have elite players that regardless of the position, you got to take care of those guys. And he's talking about Watt specifically. I mean, he's a tremendous player and person. And in so many words, look, they want to continue to create an environment where players want to stay here too. And he goes on to say, if you have a good player, not to let him out of your building. And if he feels good about being here and you feel good about having him, you got to find a way to make it work. And here's the money quote. And I've said this several times when it comes to the cap and contracts and all like that. Here's what Khan said. There's always ways to make it work. And, there is always ways. Now, some ways people might not like with the restructures and all like that. But if you have a good player and you want to retain him, and we all know about market values and all like that, there are ways to make that happen. And I would expect one of those players that they will make happen in the next 100 days will be Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Sure. I think that deal's a lock to get done. Is there any circumstance where a deal does not occur by week one?
Only if
of course there always could be, but
injury only, serious injury only would be the only way. I don't see that working out. Now, Deontay Johnson obviously is another story there. And, I don't want to go down, at least in an early portion of this podcast, that Deontay Johnson rabbit hole again. We talked about it quite a bit. I don't think he's expected to be at OTAs this week. We'll see here, but maybe we'll talk about him more on the back end. But while we're talking about the front end, you've kind of done a deeper dive into Andy Weidl and almost have like a Weidl file, if you will.
I like that. I should have thought of
that. So why don't you tell the folks a little bit after diving a little bit deeper into Andy Weidl, what you have found?
Right. I wanted to take the weekend to learn as much as I could about Andy Weidl, because anytime you're talking about a front office hire, especially an external one, generally there isn't a lot known, and it's hard to judge these guys, obviously, especially when they're not former GMs. You don't know exactly what their role was and how much control they had. So I just wanted to learn for myself and for everyone reading as much as possible about who Andy Weidl is, his background, and a little bit on his draft philosophy and just overall history. And so I can't explain it all. Check out the post. It's called The Big Book of Andy Weidl on Steelers Depot. That'll explain it better than I'll be able to in these next couple of minutes. But Pittsburgh native, went to Mount Lebanon, big football family. We talked about his brother Casey Weidl being part of the Eagles, and he was let go after the draft. But his other brother, Kevin Weidl, works for the Ravens as a Southwest, Midwest area scout, and he worked for ESPN at Scouts Inc. And so pretty big football family there. Even another brother who does not work in football, Brennan, has a daughter named Rooney. And so I assume that's based on, the Pittsburgh roots there, if I had to guess. And so very much a Pittsburgh type of family. And even whenever Andy Weidl worked in Baltimore back in the, 2010-ish type era, he lived in Pittsburgh because he was a Northeast scout. And so he just stayed in Pittsburgh. And so he's actually been in the area for a good chunk of his football life. And so got his first job in Pittsburgh in 98, 99. That was through Tom Donahoe, who has a really good relationship with the Weidl family. Donahoe and Weidl's dad played high school football together at Mount Lebanon. Weidl's known him since he was in 8th grade, working camps for him and things like that. They worked together as recently as this past year in Philadelphia. And so Weidl is credited Dono is one of his biggest influences, also credited Bill Nunn and Ozzie Newsome, Jim Harbaugh, Jim Haslett, guys like that. And so, or John Harbaugh, I should say. And so those are some of his coaching influences. After Pittsburgh, he went to Baltimore and worked there as an area scout for about a decade or so. Actually, he went to New Orleans next, I think, and then Baltimore, and then got hired by Philadelphia back in 2016. In terms of his actual philosophy and kind of mindset, which is probably the most important and relevant part of that, he likes team speed on defense. He's talked about the need for defenses to swarm to combat mobile quarterbacks, and so that's important to him. He likes the physically and mentally tough guys. He got the mental toughness part from guys like Harbaugh and Bill Nunn. He talked about his first NFL draft class ever was 98. And so that's Alan Faneca. That's Heinz Ward, two really physically, mentally tough dudes that kind of set the groundwork for him. He wants versatility, especially up front for the offensive line. Talked about that as well. Didn't seem super concerned with overall size, not the cookie cutter. You got to be this, big to play this position. He told The Athletic in 2020, great players come in any shape and size. And so looking at because basically the last 3 years, 2020 through this past class, 2022, he was sort of running the Eagles draft. He didn't have final say. Obviously, that was Howie Roseman, but he was basically the dude in charge of the draft. And so you kind of look at those last 3 draft classes, some speed at receiver with Jalen Reagor and Devonta Smith, guys like that, some really sparky.
He however, wasn't he didn't want them to go the Reagor way, though, did he? He wanted them to take the LSU kid, I think.
Well, someone said that. Is there an official report about that?
I thought I read. Well, that's kind of what I'm referencing. I don't know how far you've gone down that rabbit hole or not, but I thought there was something out there saying that they kind of went against, kind of got overruled in that situation.
Okay, I haven't seen that, but I didn't dig into it too deeply. But I mean, either way, Reagor was the pick, and I mean Jefferson is a pretty athletic guy as well. So I mean, I guess it kind of cuts both ways. Liking some of the more versatile, athletic big men up front. Obviously, this past year they draft Jordan Davis. They draft Cameron Jurgens, who was a really athletic center out of Nebraska. Landon Dickerson last year, really good athlete. Milton Williams, another one as well. Pittsburgh actually showed some interest in Milton Williams back in 2021, and then some late round pass rushers in 2020. That was Casey Tuhill from Stanford. In 2021, they took 2 of them, Teron Jackson and Patrick Johnson. This past year, they took Kyron Johnson from Kansas, who Pittsburgh also had interest in the pre-draft process, and a lot of draft picks as well. This Eagles team had a lot of draft picks to play around with. So I would just say speed, especially at receiver and defensively, athletic big guys, and late round pass rushers is kind of some of the common themes between these last 3 draft classes for Philadelphia.
Not that it means much in the rearview mirror at this point. Chris Mortensen was the one that was on, I guess, a radio show, South Jersey 97.3 ESPN back, I don't know, November 2021. The day after the worst game of Reagor's NFL career, Mortensen was part of the group of analysts on the ESPN show NFL Rewind and wanted to set the record straight on the Eagles situation with Reagor. He says what people misunderstand is number 18, Jalen Reagor. He was the guy the Eagles took ahead of Justin Jefferson last year in the 2020 draft. And listen, as the story goes, and nobody has denied it, he says it was Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman, who both decided they wanted Reagor over what their player personnel draft board said, which was Justin Jefferson at the 21st overall pick. And so they took Jalen Reagor. I guess Mortensen says he's a bust when you put him. He's a bust, but when you put him on the field, and they continue to put him on the field, opposing defense basically takes away Devonta Smith because they know the Eagles want to target. So in so many words, they're saying that Weidl was basically the one kind of, I guess, responsible putting the board together with them. And I guess the board said, take Jefferson there, and got overruled, and Reagor was the pick there, at least as the story goes.
All right. No, it's interesting. I mean, assuming that's true, and it sounds like it is, then that would be certainly a feather in Weidl's cap, and it's hard to use the Reagor pick against him. But again, just the overall thought of speed, on the perimeter, speed defensively, athletic guys up front, and always drafting edge rushers, which is probably music to your ears.
Oh yeah, take 7 of them as far as I'm concerned. And look, I mean, the all around blocking tight end is become a bit of a unicorn in the when it comes to the NFL, and obviously the Steelers shouldn't hopefully have to worry about that for a little bit with a guy like Pat Freiermuth there. That's all in pulling guards. You can never have enough athletic pulling guards, in my opinion, on top of that there. But it will be I'm with the aspect of too, man. In today's NFL, with the way almost by year the rules are being slanted more in favor of offenses and all. You got to be able to get after the quarterback. And imagine what this Steelers team, the outcomes of maybe several of these games these last couple of years had they not had a guy like TJ Watt,
Sure. Because like the Seattle game, if I don't win that one, yeah.
Right. And, another thing, he did mention cornerback, you got to have some cornerbacks and all. Khan did in one of these interviews here as well, too. But look, things tend to, and we've seen this with Steelers defenses over the years. Things tend to happen more when you get pressure on the quarterback, especially in very kind of predictive down and distance type situations there. Rush coverage goes hand in hand, yada, yada. But, man, if you're able to get pressure on that quarterback consistently, that can help. To me, that hides the deficiencies in the secondary like none other. Whereas on the backside, if you were to flip it around, if you have a good secondary but not a great pass rush, I think it's harder. It's harder for a secondary, especially in today's NFL, to kind of cover that lack of not having a pass rush there. So, yeah, I'm excited about the fact that we could have another early round pass rusher as early as next year.
Right, or even late, because it seems like they're doing they're just taking a dart throw at a late round pass rusher because they feel like the upside there is probably immense, and they want to be able to replenish and have good depth there in case injuries do happen. So that's the very kind of skinny on Andy Weidl again. The article.
Was there any one thing that you uncovered that was really a wow to you when digging deeper in Weidl?
I don't think there was any wow. It was just good because I knew nothing about the guy. I mean, you're starting from a knowledge base of, you knew what his title was, you knew his overall background, but you didn't really know much about the person and some of his scouting philosophies and things like that. I will say, and again, you're going to expect people in articles and commentary in the public sphere to speak highly of them, but some of the guys he's worked with have really spoken highly of Andy Weidl. Joe Douglas, the Jets' current GM, called Weidl, quote, as consistent of an evaluator as you'll ever find. And Eric DeCosta called him one of the most thorough guys he's ever been around. And so the passion that he has. One story is apparently Weidl was the big reason why Baltimore drafted Haloti Ngata back in the first round, 12th overall. That Weidl stood on the table for Ngata and went to bat for him and really convinced Baltimore, I guess that was Ozzie Newsome at the time, to draft him. So that's a good thing. It's also a bad thing because that made Pittsburgh face Haloti Ngata twice a year, which I'm kind of mad about. But that's one of the stories, is apparently the hardest he's ever gone to a bat for a player is Haloti Ngata.
All right. Well, obviously this front office group, especially over the course of the next, let's say 4 years, because that's how long Khan's contract is going to be judged by, trophies in the trophy case, or, or how deep they go in the playoffs. And we just talked recently how, it's been a while since this team has even won a playoff game here. So I think it would be a huge accomplishment, right out of the chute, if this team can stay healthy this year and make it to the playoffs and win a playoff game. And then obviously, beginning next year, when hopefully, when you would expect a guy like Kenny Pickett to be playing more, we'll see. George Pickens obviously should progress very quickly here with this team, as should Calvin Austin, 4th round draft pick there. I mean, you've got a lot of your investment this year tied up in the offensive, early investment tied up in the offensive side of football here. So starting next year, for sure, in 2023. You should start seeing the the fruit of your efforts when it comes to there. And obviously the clock will start ticking when it comes to drafts concerning Khan and Weidl.
Sure. I will say two things that did surprise me. Weidl said his draft process is to watch about 3 to 4 games from the current year and then 1 to 2 from the past year. And so that's kind of similar to what we do at Steelers Depot. We sort of at least 3 games on that current year and then try to go back and watch some previous years. Also, apparently, whenever he was in Pittsburgh, in turn, he kind of had to drive players to and from the airport to the team facility. Drove a 91 Chevy Lumina. And so Lumina brothers unite, Andy Weidl and I. So I was happy to see that.
Okay. All right. I like it. Yeah, so, look, I mean, the proof will be in the pudding, though. We can talk about what we think this. Here's the thing. I don't think, at least from our end, at least initially here, in the pre-draft process, I mean, I expect to play Where's Weidl and Where's Khan quite a bit there, but I think Khan and Colbert and probably Weidl too. A lot of those guys are going to start showing up at the same pro days. It'd be interesting to see if they go off the major Power 5 path, if you will, especially non-quarterbacks, kind of thing there. But I'm not expecting us to have, too much of an issue of trying to at least come up with a good, I guess, 50 to 100 names,
Right. I believe Khan did say he's going to be at pro days and basically mimic what Colbert did. So we'll be able to kind of play that game going forward, which is good. Dave, let's see. Cam Heyward speaking today, who was on the Mina Kimes podcast. And so a lot of great content there.
50 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, really good interview. I've gotten through probably about 35 minutes so far before we started doing the podcast. And so really good interview. Seemed pretty comfortable, writing a lot about what he had to say. Talked about how he wants to play at least another 5 more years until he's 38. And so that's kind of the high bar that he set for himself. But if anyone's going to play until they're 38, it's going to be Cam Heyward.
Yeah, I guess how many more years does he have on the contract?
It's a good question. I don't know exactly when it runs.
Let me look
another
real quick here.
2 years?
He is through 2024. So
another 2 years.
Playing 1, 2, so three years before his including this season, 3 seasons until his contract's up. 5 years. Whew, you think I think he can get through to 3, Father Time, as they say, is undefeated though. But you do have guys like, how old is Alewale right now?
35 going on 36. Calais Campbell, who they referenced in the podcast, he's going to be 36 September 1st. Brett Kiesel played till he was 36. Aaron Smith, 35. Hampton, 35. There have been a handful of players that played till age 38 in terms of defensive linemen. Julius Peppers, Bruce Smith, Big Ted Washington played till he was 38 somehow. Ernie Stautner did it as well. So it's a high bar, but Hayward talked about how barely playing his first 2 years back in the Steelers' old days of, the rookies sit even if you're first round picks. And of course you had Kiesel, you had Aaron Smith. And so there was good reason to sit Hayward. It's kind of giving him some extra tread on the tires later in his career.
I don't want it to look like I'm framing this as betting against Cameron Heyward in the 5 years, but you just kind of, I would be really stoked if he's still playing at a high level, in 2024. And I think that's possible. I mean, he takes care of himself. A lot of stuff, especially this offseason already, of him working with Chuck Smith outside, off the practice field in Pittsburgh. And that's never a bad thing there. The guy is just so grown ass man, strong as it is anyway. And I think he, all the techniques of the long arm, one of the best long arms is for an interior defensive lineman in the league right now. When it comes to Cameron Heyward there. So I don't want to say that he can't play 5 more years, but I just am hoping he can at least get the next 3 knocked out.
Sure, that's where it starts. And I mean, it's a high bar to set age 38. Obviously, the number of players who do it, as I just mentioned, it's a pretty small exclusive list. But I mean, not only has Hayward not slowed down, he's been getting better. Last year was his best season, despite all the crap around him, despite how bad this team's run defense was overall. I thought Hayward played his best football he's ever played before and finished the year with 10 sacks. And so this guy's still getting better. And so in terms of that bell curve of your career arc, he's still on that upswing. And so could this guy play at age 38? I'm not going to bet against it.
Look, here's the thing too with this: you're getting back, or you hope to have back Stephon Tuitt and Tyson Alualu back. And boy, I mean, you get those guys and have a healthy T.J. Watt and a progressing Alex Highsmith there. I mean, that takes who do you focus most of your efforts on and stopping there? And there are going to be situations, if they scheme this thing properly, where there will be situations where Cam Heyward will be one-on-one against a guard and or a center type situation there. Those are things that, you would expect him to win. So long story short, if everybody stays healthy on that, if they get to it back, they get Alualu back, and both those guys are at least a good portion of what they were back in 2020. I mean, yeah, this could be a double-digit sack season for Cam Heyward. He still has the athleticism, still has the moves in there as well too. So could this be another all pro season for him? Yeah, I without a doubt.
Right. And I should mention this was an appearance on the Fan Morning Show, I believe over the weekend or on Friday, that Hayward provided, I think, the most specific update on Stephon Tuitt we've had in a year or so. Saying that Tuitt is in Indianapolis right now, that the story that happened earlier this offseason, which I, questioned at the time about Tuitt selling his house, was nothing, because Tuitt never even, I guess, lived there or always lived somewhere else. I don't know the whole situation there. That Tuitt graduated. He's, I guess, graduated from Notre Dame. And so that was one reason why he wasn't around. And that Hayward said that he's in a better place now. And again, all in Hayward's words, all signs pointing to Tuitt returning.
Yeah, and I mean, we don't have long to wait now. I mean, we've speculated out this far already and haven't talked in absolutes about him up until this point. Now, you got to admit the things that came out of Cameron Heyward's mouth, specifically about Tuitt these last several days, have made one think that, okay, I'm popping my money down and saying he's going to be back. That kind of thing there, but. Look, mandatory minicamp will be here soon enough, and I think that's more of a real indicator there.
Right. So, I mean, I guess that's 1 week from now, correct? This is the start of mandatory minicamp, and so 1 week from now, we should really know without question what Stephon Tuitt's status is going to be.
You would think so.
So that's that from Cam Heyward. Hayward talked about wanting to win a Super Bowl, not only for himself, of course, but for Mike Tomlin. Was there anything else and we're still kind of going through it? It was interesting. We always talk about how every player in the league kind of has a chip on their shoulder, and obviously the underdogs, have the easy to predict and easy to figure out chip on their shoulder because no one talks about it, no one thinks they can make it. How do the great players have chips on their shoulders? How does a guy like Cam Heyward have one? And he talked about how he hates the conversation always being framed as Aaron Donald tier 1, everyone else tier 2. He thinks it should be Cam Heyward, Aaron Donald tier 1, and then everybody else. And so he said, I think it actually, quote, said, pisses him off that Aaron Donald gets put on this pedestal that somehow no one else can touch.
Well, Aaron Donald is good.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I get what Hayward's saying.
Yeah.
But I still think I put Donald in that just tier above everybody else.
Well, here's the thing. When people start, regardless of how they rank at the top of the list, you see some of these lists that still omit guys like Cameron Heyward. I don't. Do people just view him more as a defensive end and not really a defensive tie? I don't know why it seems like Cameron Heyward is kind of that guy that people, and not everyone, obviously, but people. If there's a guy that's going to get missed when people rank a top 10. Let's say interior defensive lineman, Cameron Heyward does seem to get kind of overlooked,
He has at least gotten more love in recent years, and so that's been good. I think the shift, the positional shift in terms of title on like the Steelers website from defensive end to defensive tackle has taken him out of the true 4-3 ends like the Khalil Macks and Myles Garrett's of the world and put him more with the guys who look more like him, the Grady Jarrett's, the DeForest Buckners, the Aaron Donald. Though Donald apparently plays at like 270 pounds, and so those guys really don't look that much alike, I suppose. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just because the numbers haven't always been quite as gaudy as other interior rushers, or because there's always attention given to TJ Watt and whoever the next great Steelers pass rusher is, if that's why Hayward doesn't always get that attention and respect, but he's certainly gotten more of it in recent years, and that's been really good to see.
And he's a hell of a leader too. I mean,
Yeah.
He definitely the torch was passed properly. From the Aaron Smiths and the Brett Kiesels and that obviously the last kind of Super Bowl team, if you will, that was passed properly to him. And there's just a great video from OTAs last week of them hitting the sled and him giving the instruction to I think it was DeMarvin Leal on the sled there. And that's the kind of leader and player that he is. At some point, one of these young kids is going to take his job, but his job is to hopefully to try to at least, speed up that process to some degree, at least make the defensive line better in the process. So if anybody, gets it, it's him. Remember all the people wondering a couple years ago saying, I don't know if I would extend Cam Heyward at that kind of money. And I said, it's going to happen. It needs to happen. It deserves to happen. And it did happen. Now, what's going to happen 3 years from now, or even, if Cameron Heyward turns around and has another great season in 2022, the Steelers have had, a kind of a precedent out there of not, players having to be at least 1 year away or in their final year for non-quarterbacks before they get their deals redone. I don't know. Is Cam Heyward a guy that you look at maybe after this season and saying, okay, well, he wants to play 5 more years. Let's extend this thing out a little bit, put a little bit more new money in there, get that new. In other words, is he a guy that maybe you think about doing something with that contract after the 2022 season?
It's a fair point, but I wonder if Pittsburgh wants to be careful not to open up Pandora's box and that precedent. And so I would lean towards them not doing that. But I mean, I if they're going to make an exception, it would be for Cam Heyward.
Right. Great player. I mean, great to hear talk. And it sounds like he's sharpening up his media skills at this point as well, too, by being on all these, NFL Network and these podcasts and all like that. So good for him.
Right. When he retires, you're going to hear from the guy again. He's going to be in a booth somewhere. I think he'll be more of an analyst. I think he'll be an analyst on one of these, NFL Network shows or something like that. That seems to be the path he wants to take, doing some of the broadcast boot camp and on these, media tours and things like that. And again, the last thing on him, when you talk about the leadership he's showing to the young guys that are, in the room now, that's because when Hayward was a young guy, he learned from Brett Kiesel, he learned from Aaron Smith. This is all passed down. That's the really cool thing about the Steelers defensive line room in particular, is that it's just been passed down from John Mitchell to, with the way that he taught Hampton and Smith and Brett Kiesel and the way that they taught Stephon Tuitt and Cam Heyward, on the way that Carl Dunbar has taught some of these guys as well. Just to see that line of succession kind of work over decades now is really cool to see.
All right. Yeah, I agree.
David wrote this morning about Pat Freiermuth and a potential Steelers record he could set in 2022. Could Pat Freiermuth set the Steelers' single-season reception record for catches by tight end that's currently held by Heath Miller with 76 of them? I think Freiermuth in year number 2 has a really good shot to break that mark.
Where would you put the over-under? I put up a poll on this the other day, and obviously coming out, we talked a little bit the other day about the things that Pat Freiermuth needs to work on, average yards per reception kind of thing. And I am of the mindset that even if he had 60 to 65 catches in 2022, that would be enough from him. Now, obviously, could he get higher, get more than that? You look at 17-game season now. you look at maybe how he might be used in this offense. Is 64.5 the proper over under reception number for Freiermuth as we sit here right now? And tell me why you would take the over and him maybe potentially breaking the Steelers record for tight ends.
I'm not sure what the proper over-under is, but if it is 64.5, I'm hammering the over on that one. I mean, this guy had 60 receptions last year, playing, not being the number one tight end out of the gate, playing only 62% of the total offensive snaps, and still put up 60 receptions in his rookie year. And so sophomore year as the number one out of the gate, assuming he stays healthy, there's those concussion concerns, obviously, but putting that aside for a moment, I mean, I think he's going to get at least 70, and I think he certainly could threaten Heath Miller for that record mark.
Look, he's going to catch some balls, and they need him to catch some balls. That's for sure. They might need him to catch a lot more on third down this year as well too. It'd be interesting. I'd like to see him play more, kind of small ball, if you will. And we've heard kind of Zach Gentry weigh in on this, and it would make sense as they develop some of these younger wide receivers in Pickens and Calvin Austin to go more two tight end set through this thing moving forward here. And that could indeed be the case. I without a doubt, you would think that Freiermuth has a decent chance or should be a slam dunk to finish at least in the top three on the team in overall reception numbers, right? Because you would think a guy like Deontay, if he stays healthy, you would think he would lead the team in that area. How much are they going to use Najee Harris out of the backfield? Again, there's a good chance that Najee, at a minimum, could put up, 65 receptions in 2022. And then who's the next? To me, it feels like it's going to be a battle between Freiermuth and Najee Harris for who has the second most receptions on this team. And if indeed more of the offense runs through Freiermuth this year, then that's why I think your over-under number is indeed right around that 64.5. And if he can stay healthy and if he can stay on the field for all 17 games, yeah, you like his chances of hitting 70, 71.
Right. Now, I understand this team's going to try to run the ball more this year. Obviously, the passing game is going to be a little less of the emphasis, going from a Hall of Famer with so much control and knowledge like Ben to either a rookie in Kenny Pickett or a new veteran face in Mitch Trubisky. This team's probably going to throw vertically more than they did last year, and so that may take away some of the short dump-off, safety valve type throws that Freiermuth benefited from. But again, you put him over a full 17-game season as the guy from day one, it's hard for me to think he's going to catch fewer passes than he did as a rookie.
Here's the thing. You should be able to write down right now at least 60 passes, at least 60 receptions for Pat Freiermuth. And the Steelers are going to win some games. He's going to have 7, 8, 9 touchdowns on top of it. As we talked the other day, it sure would be nice to see that average yards per catch go up on top of it there. So I think the only question with him at this point when it comes to Freiermuth, and this obviously assumes he stays healthy for at least 16 out of 17 games, is can he stay over that 10 yards per catch number, and how many more catches more than 60 can he have?
Right. That's the question to me. I think, again, as you said, what could that yards per catch be? I don't think it's going to be the number Freiermuth wants it to be, because I think he's going to be continuing that role as the Juju Smith-Schuster of this team, now that Juju's officially gone, as that third down, gotta have it, option route, over the ball type guy. But he should be able to get a couple more splash plays. And again, I think he's going to have the volume, because regardless if it's Trubisky or Pickett, you're going to want to trust and rely on that sturdy, sure-handed tight end to be your guy. And so I think that's going to lend itself to a lot of catches that way.
Man, you just go back to many moons ago when last time the Steelers had a young quarterback,
Mm-hmm.
You got to rely on, and we've said this several times, and we're going to continue to say it several more times throughout this offseason. The only way this Steelers team is going to make some noise in 2022 is they're going to have to effectively run the football a lot better than what they've done these last 2 years for starters. Second, they're going to have more explosive plays down the field, whether it be explosive runs, explosive passes, those kind of things there. And they're going to have amazing defensive play across the board from this team, because I don't think that you're going to see an offensive unit be able to mature quick enough where this is a team that's going to constantly be able to go 75 yards down the field, for touchdowns there. So they're going to have to be able to take the football away on the defensive side of the ball. And the offense is going to have to be able to work on short fields and be able to run the football and play a lot of that small ball, that two tight end, get the ball to the tight end, especially on third down, especially in situational. They're going to have to be situationally sharp, like we haven't seen in a few years now, because as bad as you want to say maybe Ben Roethlisberger has been the last couple of years, at least there were situations late in games where Ben bailed you out,
Right. But that you can't rely on that this year, obviously.
No. And apologies to Mitch Trubisky or whoever. I mean, at some point, it's going to happen. Kenny Pickett's going to be your quarterback of this team. Is that going to be 4 weeks into the season? Is it going to be 6 weeks into the season? Is it going to be 10 weeks into the season? We'll see. Obviously, the longer that it takes, it probably means that Trubisky's had some success in there, but it's going to happen. I will be floored if Kenny Pickett's not the starting quarterback of this team, let's say by, week 12 or so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really put a number in my head about when I expect Pickett to start. He could be week 1, but I just go in with a clean slate in camp and see how things look. And then obviously if he doesn't win the job coming out of the summer, then we'll just see how Trubisky plays, how this team performs overall. But you mentioned the situational football offensively. You're right. Last year, this team, 18th ranked third down offense, 23rd ranked red zone offense. Even for as bad as the Steelers defense was last year, they were top 10 in both third down defense and red zone defense. This situational offense this year has to be better. They got to be above average, I would say, at least in third down, and probably even maybe top 10 in the red zone in terms of finishing drives and making those drives count.
Look, if we're getting to the point we're thinking, all right, the playoffs are here. Steelers are in the playoffs here, man. Looking back at the season, Alex, boy, what a great job Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth did.
Right. It's probably going to be how good this offensive line turn around, because that sets the table for everything. If this offensive line can improve better, especially as a run blocking unit, not blowing assignments and being cohesive and just being better, then that really sets the whole offense up for success.
All right.
All right, Dave, OTA starting today. We'll hear from some players, I assume, later on, and we'll come back Friday. But before anything else you want to talk about before we get to some reader emails and close out today's show?
Anything else stick out by some of these other players, some of the things that they've said? What do you think about some of the comments maybe by Levi Wallace about the cornerback 1, cornerback 2 quote or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, I think he talked about he never heard the term cornerback 1 versus cornerback 2. I mean, if you're a starting corner, you're a starting corner. To him, it probably doesn't matter where teams, because that's more of an evaluation. Are you a number 1 corner? Are you the quote unquote lockdown corner, or are you the other corner on the other side? But when you're out there, no one cares if you're cornerback 1 or cornerback 2. You're a starter and you're going against a good receiver, and that's all that really matters.
What do you think about some of the comments made by Dan Moore?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the big takeaway was there. You're just talking about needing to continue to work. And I thought some of the things that his trainer, Duke Manyweather, talked about with Kendrick Green and Dan Moore. And I thought what Manyweather talked about with Moore in the bull rush is something we had just covered on Depot. I did a video breakdown of Moore needing to have a better strike and a stronger anchor and positioning his hands better to defend some of these bull rushes. And that's going to be important under Pat Meyer, that wants to use aggressive sets and to even chase some of these guys down against some wider techniques and be aggressive whenever you're able to. And so for Moore, I think developing strength and developing, more importantly, his hand placement on his strike and his punch, is going to be really the defining thing for him his sophomore season.
Look, the interior portion of this line, the Steelers, you expect James Daniels to really have a great season. I mean, it really feels like you got a lot invested for sure in there in being a key cog and helping turning this thing around. What's going to happen at the other guard position there? I mean, Kevin Dotson, if you wanted to kind of bet on a guy a couple years ago that maybe the Steelers got to steal in, you thought maybe Kevin Dotson, but to date, he hasn't lived up to that. Obviously, and obviously last year he missed more than half of the season because of that ankle injury. Makes you kind of wonder maybe how that thing might have looked a little bit different, at least on the offensive line for a little bit, had Kevin Dotson been able to play the whole season and been healthy on top of it. I mean, now we've gotten into a situation here where we're wondering who's going to be the left guard, right?
I mean, I still believe it's going to be Kevin Dotson, but I wonder how good of a guard is Kevin Dotson going to be is more the question to me, because I think the talent's all there. Can he put it together? Of course, can he stay healthy? But I started a new mini series on Depot over the weekend called Under the Microscope. Some players who are certainly under the bright lights this year. And Dotson, to me, is a name very much in that camp led off of the series, but we don't talk about him too much. We talk about Chase Claypool and, of course, Devin Bush and the quarterback situation. And all those guys, to be fair, are very much under the microscope. But Kevin Dotson, to me, one guy who is very much in that position that needs to have a really strong quality year 3 for this team to continue asking him to be the starting left guard going forward. We don't talk about that enough. And so it's a very big year 3. If he does not play well this year, this team may very well be looking for a new left guard next year.
And, what happens with Mason Cole here? Mason Cole kind of gets swept under the rug in all this talk because of this team adding James Daniels, because of what's happening over there at left guard, because of the team re-signing Chikwama Okorafor to the deal that they had, to this a lot of optimism being there with Dan Moore Jr. because of this is his second year. We kind of forget that the center of this offensive line, at least right now, is Mason Cole. And, I don't think you can stand up here and pound the table and say, "Oh man, we can guarantee this guy's going to be the top 6-7 center in the NFL right now." What if that position does not improve drastically out of the chute?
Sure, and I don't expect
him in the middle of it.
Yeah, I don't expect Cole to be a top 10 center in the NFL. I don't think he needs to be. I think he just needs to be more consistent and not have the valleys that Kendrick Green. Yeah, that certainly, but not have the downswings that Green had. Just be a steady presence. Don't have to be anyone that's great or an all-pro or the next Marquise Pouncey, but be a decent run blocker, hold your own in pass pro, and again, just not have the bad snaps, the on the ground, the missing assignments, be better with back blocks on some of these trap and gap schemes. Do those things, and that's fine. The issue with Green, there were just so many highs and lows. And listen, I get Green was thrown into the fire. I'm not trying to be too harsh for him, but what I'm looking for that position is really just more of a stabilizing force.
Right.
So
but he does seem to be a guy that's not talked about right now.
You're right. Yeah.
Right.
I think he's the forgotten free agent signing because, like you said, the focus is on James Daniels, the big money that he got, Kevin Dotson. What can Dan Moore, Kendrick Green do in year 2? I bet you some Steeler fans have forgotten Mason Cole exists. Like he's going to be the week 1 center. People are going to go, who is that guy? I don't know. I don't even recognize who that guy is. And so you're right. But as long as he stays that way, if he starts and people kind of forget who he is, that probably means a good thing because it means it's probably being that stabilizing force. I
mean, look, we might know real quick into the 2022 season if they're far from done from rebuilding this offensive line.
Right. And I think there's still a ways. Like Mason Cole is not your long-term center. He's not going to be your center 3 years from now. He's probably a 1 to 2 year. I know he signed with a 3-year deal, but he's probably a 1 to 2 year, more or less stopgap. He just wanted a more veteran guy that had experience that could come in and play day 1. But I think barring injury, it's still safe to say the Steelers projected offensive line week 1 at Cincinnati is going to be more Dotson, Cole, Daniels, and Okorafor. That seems to be the way they're running right now. And I expect that to remain the same again, barring an injury.
Look, hopefully, man, they can just all stay healthy for all the offseason here. Right. And, especially with all these new moving younger pieces on the offensive side of football, man. They could really use some continuity throughout the offseason with this offensive line, for sure. They need that because once again, being so young and all these changes on the offensive side of football.
Yeah, that youth offensively really needs to get talked about more because it is a very young offense overall. So that's a good stopping place for today, I think, in terms of the news. We'll certainly learn a lot more from OTAs. So, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let's see what we have here. Scott writes in, "Hi, Dave and Alex, longtime listener, reader, second-time emailer here." He says, "I've been thinking about how you guys have emphasized that successful run rate is a much more meaningful metric than the conventional yards per carry." And he says he totally agrees. He said he wanted to see thoughts on extending this concept. Would it be reasonable to apply the definition of successful run to pass plays as well, i.e. the definition of successful offensive play would be the same as a successful run? Yeah, look, I mean, Scott, sometimes even in games, I think you'll see me total successful play without a doubt. Look, I mean, I don't care how you do it. If you first down, if you gain more than 45% of the yards needed on first down, I don't care how you do it on a run or how a pass. Successful play is a successful play. If they only ran the football 4 times in a game, and if the other 56 times you had a success rate of 65% on pass plays, you're probably going to win that game. So yeah, I don't think just merely putting the emphasis on successful plays on runs only is indeed not enough. For sure, because you can have some successful a successful run rate, but what happens if your successful runs, you have 2 successful runs in a row, but yet you're still not at a first down level there, and then you're passing on third down, and your third down success rate is like 32%. There is a glowing problem there at that point. However, I will say that if you are consistently having a successful run rate week in, week out, especially early in games, then more than likely you're going to be able to pass the football well, because the team's keying on the run, those kind of things, they're on top of it. So usually the byproduct of a successful run rate, especially early in games, generally is a successful passing game. And then once again, as I always like to say, you run successful early so you have a chance to run successful late in games. And that's one thing that we haven't seen enough of in many moons now, is this team being able to bury other teams in the fourth quarter at the 8-minute or less mark with the lead by burying them with the run. And I would dare say that I bet Matt Canada is really hoping to get into some of those situations this year. And the Steelers, obviously, as a whole, where you keep your defense off the field as much as possible in those final 8 minutes of the game, and you're just absolutely bludgeoning the out of opposing defenses with runs or play action passes off runs off of 2 tight end groupings, that kind of thing there. So if it sounds like we've diminished the aspect of figuring a metric of successful play, whether it's run or pass, then shame on us. But yeah, you have to have some degree of success passing the football as well too, and especially in situational ball. And that's one thing that Alex has talked quite a bit about. I think this offseason as well too. We have to see this team better situationally, third downs, red zone, goal to go, those kind of things there. But let me tell you, if this team is not having a successful run rate of higher than 50%, starting early on in the season, it might make for a long season, plain and simple.
It almost certainly will, I think. But you talk about, it's funny, you mentioned the bludgeoning. Cam Heyward on that podcast with me and Akimes talked about the game he was the angriest last year was the first Bengals game because the Bengals just kept running the ball and running the ball. They threw 20 times in that entire game and won comfortably because Steelers could not stop Joe Mixon and that Bengals rushing attack, and it just pissed Hayward off to no end. And hopefully Pittsburgh can do the opposite to the Bengals and other teams this year. In terms of the metric,
the last time we've really even kind of seen that, you have to almost go back to the Todd Haley era against the Bengals, where they was running power to the left with De Castro, and it was almost like Todd Haley become the new Herb Brooks, in doing those drills again. Just keep running it until they show. That's the kind of mentality that Steelers football, especially the last time they were winning, was. Here it is. You know what's coming. Can you stop it? And we haven't seen that, especially on the ground game with the Steelers in some time now.
And I just wonder, though, in terms of the pass success stat, do the numbers need to change or do they not? Because a successful first down run is 4 yards, right, on 1st and 10? Is that the number? It varies. It depends who you ask, but
I have been going more to the 4 point, kind of the updated studies by Chase Stewart, I think it was, on Pro Football Perspective, that really it's 45% of the yards needed on first down. So if it's 1st and 10 and nobody gets a 4.5 yard run in the NFL.
Oh yeah. So basically, they just call 50%. That seems a weird number to choose.
Right.
Okay. But if it's 4 or 5 yards, I mean, obviously your passing offense needs to be more than 4 or 5 yards at pop. That feels like what Pittsburgh did last year. Their offense was 4 or 5 yards at a pop, and that didn't work out well.
Look, if you can gain, the old saying is, if you gain 4 yards on every play, you'll never lose a game, right? Unless you have a lot of penalties in there. But what is the right number? 4.5 yards on first down for a run. I mean, regardless, it would carry over for a pass play as well too.
But does it carry over? Because the successful, a successful yards per carry is 4.5 yards per carry. If that was your passing attack, that's atrocious. It just feels like it should be. Should it be weighted differently? I understand yards are yards, but it feels like it shouldn't be considered one and the same.
I think that's kind of where you look at a totality of like intended air yards and completed air yards.
That's fair.
I think that's kind of more where that metric kind of comes in at, as being deciphering back to, drilling back towards a successful run rate. You see what I'm saying there? I mean, I bet if you have a successful run rate, I would imagine, or at least would hope, that your completed air yard distance would, be up around 6 or 7.
Right. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting stat, but I just wonder, would it look differently than the successful run rate, because the passing yards are more. There's more opportunity for chunk there than there's in the run.
Well, game. maybe that's something that we can get Clayton to drill down on, some aspect of, how important is successful pass rate, successful play rate on passes, when using run metric. When you, in other words, across the board. But obviously, if you're throwing a lot of 3-yard passes, and you're not connecting downfield on explosive plays, is it going to matter what your successful run rate is?
Right. It doesn't feel like that's going to be
is that where you're getting
at? That's what I'm getting at, essentially. Yeah.
In other words, unfortunately, we didn't have a good enough successful run rate last season to kind of stack it up, but throwing short, running long is not a great plan. I think we've learned that. If we've learned anything over the last couple of years, that's not a great way to run your offense. Throw short, run long.
Right. That's not sustainable unless you have an elite level quarterback like a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning.
Now you have, obviously most of your game, you hope to have some nice throw short, run long aspects of it. But look, I think you've seen the last couple of days, couple of these graphics come out by some of these advanced metrics guys and all like that. showing the Steelers' lack of explosive plays and how it's impacted them.
Right. We've talked about that a bit today in an article I read about Chris Oladogan talking about the ability to bring some of that splash, obviously not in a starting capacity, but just in general, and then kind of talking about how lackluster the Steelers offense was at big plays last year.
And I even booked something last night that I have not even read yet that I hope to read today about our explosive plays worth more than the yards they create.
Right. In other words, repeat that.
Are explosive plays worth more than the yards they create?
Okay, that's the teaser. So what does that mean? The implication of momentum or okay, feel interesting.
Yeah, but I want to drill that down. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about what I found on Friday on that.
Yeah, I'm curious to see what the actual information is there.
Because look, you gotta have explosive plays in games, you just look at the talk stat. I mean, one of the most important stats on a week-to-week basis in the NFL is explosive plays and turnovers, and the old +2 never goes away. If you have 2 more explosive plays and or takeaways than your opponent does, you're going to win the football game 80% of the time or more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we've known for years. Now, turnovers, you have more control over explosive plays than you do over turnovers to some degree, right?
Yeah. But I think just for Pittsburgh this year, they need the chunk plays. They're not going to be able to, because the run game, it should be better, but it's not going to be top 10. It's not going to be this well-oiled machine averaging 4.7 yards per pop like the Browns or the Colts. And so they're going to have to get chunk plays that's going to flip fields and not require this team to go on long, drawn-out, efficient 10, 12-play, 75-yard drives. That cannot be their consistent key to success.
And look, I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're not going to see a huge increase in explosive runs by Najee Harris. It's just not who he is.
Yeah, I think a little bit, but certainly he's not going to be busting off 40-yard runs every week.
He better have more explosive runs than he had last year.
Mm-hmm.
How
many did he have last year?
Not many. Let me see if we can pull that up real quick.
And how do you define? We get in this whole conversation. How do we define? Is that 15 yards, 20 yards?
I've always been explosive plays and explosive play.
What's 20?
20 yards, right?
Okay.
Let's see if we can go by game real quick here.
Are you going to go by game? Okay, I will see how that looks across maybe the entire NFL in terms of.
Well, I guess I could drill it down.
I mean, you can do it. You can do it either way.
Do you have a number yet?
No, it's going to take me. We're to the portion of the show. I missed our research in the middle of a podcast. It's like riding a bike. Haven't done this show in a couple of days.
But he didn't have but about 2 or 3, I don't think. In total here. Hold on. We'll get it here.
I'll get it here in a second.
20 to
Who doesn't love dead air? That's what the people come here for. So if you're going 20 plus yards, Jonathan Taylor led the NFL with 14. Harris had 6.
But how many of those were runs?
6.
Okay, so he had 6 total.
6 runs of 20 plus yards if PFR is to be believed. And so again, there was a lot of carries in that too. He was, I think, 3rd or 4th most carries, maybe even 2nd most behind Taylor in carries last year. So if you put it as a percentage, it probably looks even a bit worse. But he had 6, same as Joe Mixon, Javonte Williams, fellow rookie.
All right, two of those came against the Browns in the final game of the season, 30 and 37 yards there. Let's see.
In week 17, right?
I'm sorry, week. What did I say?
You said final game. Yeah, week 17.
Okay, week 17.
Yeah.
2 of them there. He had 1 the week before late. No, it was actually in the second quarter against the Chiefs in that 12-26 game on 12-26. Had 1 against the Vikings. So he only had he had 0 double explosive runs. He had 6 regular explosive runs, with 2 of those coming in the last game against the Browns.
Okay. So as a percentage,
our next to last game against the Browns.
Right. Again, you do want to see the number get better. And so I think it will, but again, you're right. He's not going to be, Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor, who had these monster runs week after week.
Man, I'd like to see him at least hit 10 explosive runs, you know?
That'd be nice. Josh Allen had 9 for the Bills last year. It's kind of crazy. The leaders, there were only 3 guys hit double digits last year. Jonathan Taylor with 14, Chubb with 12, and Rashad Penny with 11. He came on strong late in the year for Seattle. 11.
All right. Jim Bendis writes in, hey guys, I was wondering what are your opinions on in the last 5 to 7 years? He says when the Steelers team peaked and the team was the same. This is a weird kind of way he has this written here. I was wondering what are your opinions on in the last 5-7 years? Number 1, when the Steelers team peaked and the team was the same since. Number 2, the point when the Steelers lost the best possible opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. He says, my answer to number 1 is when either Ryan Shazier got hurt or when AB got knocked out by Vontaze Burfict. AB was never the same since, he writes. My answer to number 2 is when Devin Bush got hurt and knocked out for the rest of the year. Defense was not the same since. I guess he's trying to say when was the Steelers peaked and hasn't been the team. I guess he's trying to say in each of the last 5 to 7 years. Look, obviously when Ryan Shazier went down, many years ago, that was obviously a key turning point in the season there, especially when they tried to get guys like Sean Spence and Arthur Moats and who else was
LJ. Well, they weren't playing LJ for it.
Trying to figure out how all that went. That was a huge turning point. As far as the last time we talk about Steelers team that kind of compete. He says lost the best possible opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. I think it was a couple of years ago, quite honestly. When they had a good enough defense. I think if you look back to maybe last year, maybe Super Bowl was a little bit of a stretch there, but it was definitely the last year. Had they kept that defense healthy last year, could they have at least won a playoff game last year?
Nah, they didn't have the offensive firepower. That offense was so just barely held together. I think 26. I mean, obviously, literally speaking, 2016 when they went to the AFC title game against the Patriots, they were right on the doorstep. 2017, you had a great offense. You had all the pieces defensively. Obviously, you had injuries there, but to lose that game to Jacksonville, in upset fashion, 2017 felt like that should have been the year.
I mean, 2020 was the last time that you and I thought that the window was going to be open there, right?
Right. But in the middle of watching that year and the way that team limped to the finish line, when you got to the postseason, you felt like this team's probably not equipped to make a run because they peaked very early in that year.
Right. And I'm just trying to see why he has last 5 to 7. I guess he wants us to pull out a specific year there. I don't know, Jim, how you got that kind of phrase there. Hopefully we answered that correctly there.
I say 2017. If I'm interpreting the question correctly, the last time this team was at its peak, I'll say 2017.
Justin Brisbane wants to know why we're so down on the Steelers. I didn't understand why everyone is so down on the season outlook. He says they went 9-7-1 last year and likely would have been a 10-7 team had it not been for the COVID positive with Ben the night before the Lions game. He says everyone is agreeable that quarterback play should be improved this year. Everyone agrees that they did more to address the offensive line. He says everyone agrees that a healthier defense should lead to a better run D and overall better defense in general. He says we all agree Jack is an upgrade at middle linebacker, and we all agree Najee should be better. And he's got a lot of we all agree in here. We all agree Najee should be better in year 2. We all agree Canada will be able to run his offense with less restrictions. So with that being said, I don't see all the negativity. To me, he says 9 wins should be the absolute floor with this team. He says, what am I missing? Well, other teams are trying to be better too. Have the Steelers done enough to hang with other teams supposedly getting better as well too there. The quarterback should be improved this year. And Why is he saying everyone is agreeable that the quarterback play should be improved this year? And do you agree with that statement?
I think it's a better fit in terms of what Matt Canada wants to do and his goals and ideals for his offense. I think Trubisky, Pickett fit that better from a mobility standpoint, from a off-platform standpoint, from a play action under center standpoint. Is it going to be better overall? I think it's going to be better in that respect in terms of Ben's ability to command an offense, to run 2-minute, to rally teams late. It's not going to be as good. I thought, to answer the question about why, and I haven't even picked what I think Pittsburgh's record's going to be, so I've not really made a declaration on how down or not down I am on Pittsburgh this year.
And a lot can change on the next 90, 100 days anyway.
Which is why I'm reluctant to talk about those things here in late May. But I thought what James Jones on NFL Network over the weekend, he summed it up well. He said, regardless of who starts, Trubisky or Pickett, the Steelers will have the worst quarterback in the AFC North. Now, Watson's situation, we all understand, don't know how available he'll be, but when they're all available, Pittsburgh will have the worst quarterback in the North. And that is priority number one. It's the most important position, not only in football, but in all of sports. If you're the worst position there, that's every reason to believe that you're going to be slotted fourth. And at least it's reasonable to rank it that way.
All right, and they did address the O-line, but there are still question marks on the offensive line, even though they have addressed the offensive line.
Right. They addressed it from one of the worst in football, and so it'll be better, but it does not mean it's going to be a top 10 unit all of a sudden.
And, healthier defense, obviously, yeah, you would. It has to be better. The run defense better be better because if it's not, then there's absolutely no shot of this team, being over a couple games over 500 in total. I think Justin Brisbane has his perfect colored glasses on right now, where he thinks, you would think some of these things will be better, but make no mistake about it. To say that the quarterback play will be improved enough that it can get you to compete even in your own division, I think is a huge question mark at this point. And the offensive line, they have addressed it, but I mean, how much more better than awful will it be, right?
Right. And listen, I think this team's made strides. I've been as bullish on this run defense, this D-line as anybody. I think this O-line will be better. I think this team will be competitive. It's going to be a tough AFC North, probably similar to last year, where first and last place were separated by just 2 games. So, I mean, you're in that situation, who knows what could happen, but it's reasonable for people to be down on it, just given not only Pittsburgh's issues, but how strong the North is. This isn't your North of 10 years ago when you're playing Thad Lewis or Seneca Wallace in the Week 17 snooze fest against the Browns. These teams are all competitive, all going to be in the playoff mix. And it's, to me, besides the AFC West, it's the toughest division in football. And
look, they drafted a couple, and you hope these guys can become superstars in Pickens and Austin, but it's going to take a little bit of time, to get these kids, maximizing their potential. Plain and simple. And right. In the meantime, I mean, what do people think about Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool? And I mean, you would think Pickens was one of those guys going to be the third leg of that out of the chute, right?
Sure, but I think, as you said, just offensively, it's such a young and new unit. There's going to be growing pains associated with that. And I think you have to understand, even though there's talent, it's not going to all come together out of the chute.
I mean, in a perfect world, maybe Austin comes in and makes an instant impact, maybe as a slot guy that allows Claypool to kind of share time with Pickens. I mean, Pickens. Don't forget that Pickens mostly played the X at Georgia there. So yeah, some of the skill set that he has does line up with him being able to do some stuff at all positions there, but you're not going to turn around and start the season with Pickens at X, so there's going to be some growing pains there. And even Austin, while you would, the skill set is there for him to become kind of that new age slot guy, if you will, he mostly played outside, at college. So there's a lot of there's a lot of fitting and development at those fit positions that has to happen here. And it's, and it would be a bit surprising if it does happen out of shoot. Yeah, those guys are going to get snaps. Yeah, they're not going to have any choice but to give those guys snaps there. What kind of attrition might happen, at some point early in the season there at the wide receiver position? Can Chase Claypool take that next step and be more than what he's been the last couple of seasons? I'm not convinced that he can. And if he doesn't, I mean, then you're waiting to play catch up with those other two young wide receivers.
Right. So again, just big picture, a lot of new pieces, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of question marks offensively. Is there talent? And could you sit there by week 16, week 17, say you're seeing the fruits of the labor and these guys are getting better and getting reps and not making mistakes? Sure. But what's going to happen the first month of the year? Is this team going to struggle offensively? It probably will, because of just this newness offensively. That's going to set you back. And again, in AFC North, it's super competitive. There really is no margin for error. It's going to be really tough to climb out of another 1-3 hole this year.
Yeah. And going back to even us talking a little bit about the schedule and how, it's hard to put so much emphasis on just having dates attached to opponents that you've known that you're going to have since last season ended. First 6 weeks of this is it easy? You got a couple of divisional. You open up against Cincinnati. You got Cleveland. We'll have to see what Cleveland quarterback's going to play in that game there, and obviously got Tampa and New England in there too. I mean, you better come out of these first 6 games with at least a 500 record, man, to give yourself a chance in this thing. And if you come out of this first 6 games with a couple of division losses and you're 2-4, it doesn't set up very well. You're going to take a hell of a development in the second half of the season and going to have to string together a lot of wins there.
Right. No. Well said, Dave.
All right. And long story, and once again, things can change throughout this offseason. We'll see which way I end up going here, but I'm going to be hard pressed at any point during this offseason to think that this Steelers team can go, win at least more than 10 games and be a viable playoff contender.
Yeah, I don't know where I'm going to come in.
Probably I think people should be happy if I get to a point where I think this team can legitimately win 10 games. Be honest with you.
I think the question is going to be, will they play above 500 ball? Will they be 9-8 or 8-9? Is kind of the line I think people look at this team as.
Gregory,
big picture speaking.
Gregory Simmons writes in from Northern Virginia. Why is it that most people say that AB is a Hall of Famer while downplaying the Heinz Ward chances to get into the Hall of Fame? Some say AB was the best in his era and had a greater impact. Well, can anyone name me a rule that was changed because of AB's play? He says, I can't. Oh, he's trying to. Poor Greg's got his Heinz Ward glasses on today. And he's trying to slant this thing because of the rule thing, I think. He says, some say AB was more dynamic than Heinz Ward. He says, yeah, but AB played in the era where the ball was, he's got this ends up being a lot of but in here, it looks like, and it's a long email here. He says, AB has had Big Ben for his whole career, Steeler career, while Heinz Ward had Tom, Zach, Cordell, and Maddox. And with that said, he says, AB finished with 928 receptions, 12,291 yards and 83 touchdowns. Heinz Ward finished with 1,000 receptions, 1,283 yards and 85 touchdowns. Considering their era, the quarterbacks and the stats, why is AB considered better than Heinz Ward? Because he was a better receiver than Heinz Ward, if we're being honest with each other there. It's funny how people let things get away from their memory because of a guy acting like a jackass or whatever here. Man, we're running out of superlatives on a week-to-week basis to describe the things Antonio Brown would do during games.
Sure.
I don't remember being hard-pressed for superlatives to describe the Heinz Ward game. Now, I'm not trying to diminish anything about Heinz Ward. Heinz Ward was a prototypical man. You draw him out at the time of what you're looking for a Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver, teammate, grit, toughness, reliability, whatever. Heinz Ward was it. But if we're really honestly speaking, at any given time during Heinz Ward's career, was Heinz Ward considered, the top 5 wide receivers in the league this year were, and then putting Heinz Ward in that classification?
Right. That's the big thing to me. That was the first point the reader, I think Gregory was his name, had brought up, and Ward was never in that camp, and AB was. And so it's a little that Terrell Davis thing where Davis didn't play for a long time, but that star shined so brightly. That's what got him in. I think, to me, my personal criteria I've always mentioned is, were you one of, if not the best player at your position for multiple seasons, for a longer, prolonged period of time? And if the answer to that is yes, then to me, you're probably a Hall of Famer. And AB was in that camp. Now, will he get in the Hall because of all the off-field stuff and how things have ended? That's a different question. But the reason why I think Brown has a better chance is because at his best versus Ward's best, Brown was the better player, even relative to the league he was playing in.
And people say, okay, Super Bowl MVP, blah, blah, blah. Sure. I mean, that's something that ranks up there for Heinz Ward. But and that's one of the things, when they talk about his candidacy on a year-to-year basis and try to have the discussions about him, that's obviously something that's going to be up in there. His blocking and them creating kind of the Heinz Ward rule will always be part of the discussion when talking about Heinz Ward's candidacy for Hall of Fame. And look, at some point, maybe Heinz Ward does make it, but I'll tell you right now, there's a log jam of wide receivers coming out of that era that Heinz Ward played in, and it's going to take another couple years, I think, to get through those. And by the time you get through those, then that new era, that era beyond a little bit, that came after Heinz Ward is going to start getting into the talk there. And then that's where the washout kind of happens there.
Yep. You're already seeing it. And so we can talk about Heinz Ward getting in the Hall all day. It's not going to happen. And I don't say that gleefully. I mean, I'd love to see Heinz Ward get in. I want to see any Steeler be enshrined in Canton, Ohio. But unless it's a veterans committee thing, a senior committee, whatever they're calling it, 10, 15 years from now, that's really his best path when the old timers get around and say, remember how good of a blocker Heinz Ward was, because he's not going to get in the conventional way.
And look, and it's a big if, it's sad that we didn't get to see it, happen there. But I mean, had AB kept his, nose clean and not fading, what would happen these past, 3 seasons had AB still been with his team and been, more of a team player along those lines?
I mean, he could have had he not requested a trade out of Pittsburgh and just retired, he would have been a Hall of Famer. He'd be close to getting his gold jacket by now. Now, the question is, will Brown actually get in the Hall of Fame within a couple of years of him being eligible? That to me is a really interesting question. Right now I'm saying no.
Look, it's a damn shame this team didn't win a Super Bowl during the heyday of Bell and Brown and Ben and a couple of years of Martavis in there. How the hell did they not win a Super Bowl?
That's why I talk about 2017 being that peak year, because that was the year those guys were healthy, right? Because they always had injuries, I think, during some of their playoff runs. But I think that was the year that Bell and Brown were actually healthy.
Look, I think Antonio Brown has really, obviously hurt himself more than he's helped himself these last few years. But man, I guess the memories are that guy was damn good when he was in Pittsburgh before he became such a jackass.
Right. But it's not even just one thing. It's the last 4 years of AB's career have just been a mess. And so that's going to really stick in the voters' mind. So again, it leads to the question, and do you think Brown gets in within, let's say, 2-3 years of his eligibility?
Right.
I mean, I'm asking, do you think that happens?
I mean, it's a whole Terrell Owens thing, and it's really the Terrell Owens thing on steroids.
Right.
At this point here, will the voters be able to basically chisel around those 6 years and then present those 6 years for as the reason why? Will they properly be able to do that and not be able to pay attention to all the other white noise outside of that there?
All right.
And,
I mean,
there's been
what
a
is your
lot of
opinion?
it.
Right. What is your opinion? Do you
Man,
think the voters can chisel?
I think he's got to go in the Hall of Fame, to be honest with you.
Okay. I don't think it happens. Maybe at some point later down the road, but I think Brown has burned so many bridges.
Is it gonna cost him being a first ballot guy? Yeah, I think so. I think he's done enough that people are going to say, well, there's got to be a penalty in here, and it might end up being first couple years him not getting in. But man, I don't see how you tell the story of professional football from 2011 to 2017 without talking about Antonio Brown.
That's a fair point. It's hard to argue with that. But I wonder if voters will just keep him out for those reasons. And plus, there'll be other deserving receivers to get in that he'll be competing with. So they may say, well, we'll vote in Larry Fitzgerald or whoever because they don't carry the baggage. But I will say, if Brown does get inducted into Canton anytime, I want to go to Canton and watch that Hall of Fame speech because that'll be a heck of a show. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I want to see it live.
Let's see. I mean, what is the old stat about players with X amount of all pros and pro? I mean, was a 7-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All Pro. I mean, how many guys that are 4-time All Pros are not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame? That was an argument for until Faneca got in. That was one of those things, right? I mean, how can this guy with being all pro this many times not be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
According to Pro Football Reference, who I love their Hall of Fame monitor, there are 4 players who are 4-time All-Pros to not be in the Hall of Fame. One of those is Cordero Patterson, which is more of a returner thing than it is receiver, so he doesn't really count.
I owe that guy a huge apology. When that guy finally retires, I owe that guy a huge apology.
Mm-hmm. Lionel Taylor, Del Schaffner, those guys played in the 50s and 60s, and of course Antonio Brown.
Who was that? Was he a Cowboy? Was he the Cowboy or Chief or?
He was a Ram and a Giant. I don't think he was the guy that had the murder. I don't think that's him. I think that's somebody else. But those guys played in a forgotten era. So Brown's the only, besides Patterson, the only modern era player with 4 All Pros who is not yet in the Hall. Of course, he's not eligible yet, but. To your point, generally speaking, you would expect that guy to get in, but Brown's a unique situation.
Okay. I mean, you see why I drew the line in the sand where I did, right?
Sure. The only other players to be 4-time All-Pros at receiver are Jerry Rice with 10, Lance Allworth with 6, T.O. with 5, Randy Moss with 4. And that's the list besides the other names I mentioned. So it's a rare list. So you think you would get in, but Brown, unique case. Man,
I tell you, that Cordero Patterson, props to him. Props to him for carving out what he's been able to do as a player, and albeit all return guy and all like that. But I mean, that guy's carries the football. That guy does it all, and he might not know what the play actually is when it's called in the huddle, but man, he gets results out there on the field. Yeah, he did, and so or he has with Patterson. Yeah, interesting guy there in terms of that. Some say the best kick returner in NFL history. All right. Anyway, I'll be surprised if Heinz Ward gets in, and I think Antonio Brown should at some point. We managed to probably piss off a lot of people there to close this one out there, Alex. So probably a good time to just close it out. So Alex and I'll be back on Friday. We'll wrap up what all has transpired at OTAs this week and whatever news has happened. The NFL did not process. I guess that's something to something to be learned here going into that holiday weekend, because I look back at previous holiday weekends as well too. They don't process that Friday before Memorial Day weekend. I guess the league kind of takes that Friday as a holiday, if you will. So in other words, our buddy John Comiskey, he's out there on waivers still right now. We're not going to find out the back end of transactions that happened on Thursday of last week until later on today, Alex. There, so right. So in other words, I still got a cold shot out there to see if whether or not the Steelers claim a guy like John Comiskey off waivers. We should get an answer by that today. But I thought those processed on Friday, but they don't. The league treats that Friday before Memorial Day as a holiday, so no moves got processed by the NFL on Friday.
All right, so we will find out, and if so, we'll talk about it on Friday.
All right, follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, go to SteelersDepot.com. If you want an ad-free version, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button, upper right navigational bar. Once again, sorry about my voice. No, I'm having trouble staying healthy here, but hopefully be a little bit better on Friday here. We'll wrap up more of these OTAs and all. So, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.